All right, everybody, welcome back to Sunday Shots, our second broadcast. So we are going through the book of Enoch right now. So we're going to do like we do every show. I'm going to wait just a minute and let everybody hop on, chat, and say hello. So if you're just now joining us, we do have a live chat that you are able to pop in and say hello. And we do a Q&A time afterwards. So you want to hang around for that if any questions come up during the teaching.
Gotta get our words in Nikki.
We got anybody in chat yet, Bethany?
Yeah. Actually, you have Vickie, Clarissa.
Hey, Vickie. Hey, Clarissa.
Is it Jamo?
Jamo's back.
Kristen.
Welcome, everybody.
So,
in.
do you want to wait to go over exactly what you're going to cover this week, or?
Yeah, we're going to let everybody take a minute and hop on here before we kind of get things kicked off for tonight. And so Dustin will be popping in when he can.
PW is here.
Hey, PW. So we got about 6 in chat right now.
Sounds about right.
All right. I'll wait another few minutes. But we are going to be getting into the good part of Enoch tonight. We're going to start looking at the fall of the Watchers.
Yeah, I already have questions, but I'm going to wait and see if you answer them. Brandy's Unboxings is here with us.
Brandy. So yeah, for anybody who's new, the format for tonight is a little bit different than what it is on Tuesdays. A little bit more formal. We're going to do some songs and some teaching out of the book of Enoch, but we do open it up at the end for anybody who has questions about what was said or taught, or they need more clarification on something. So we'll have a Q&A time, but it's not going to be like the normal show where it's more, conversational and we kind of take them as they pop up. We'll save all that for after the teaching part. Any new people, Bethany? I want to make sure I say hey to everybody. Bethany, did you mute yourself? I'll wait for her to pop back in here. So if there is anybody new, hello. I can't see the comments yet. All right, well, we are going to go ahead and get things kicked off here just a little bit. Just a couple of things first. For those of you who missed last week, we did a introduction to the book of Enoch, and we talked about its influence. We talked about its checkered past and why some people include it as inspired scripture and other people don't. We also talked about its huge influence on Jesus in the New Testament. And as we go through this teaching, I'm going to be bringing these things out along the way as we read stuff in Enoch that correlates into the New Testament. I'm going to be sure to point those things out as well. But that first show is available on PPR channel, so you can, if you missed that, you can go back and watch it. And Sundays here, going through the book of Enoch, is also meant to kind of coincide with what we're doing on Tuesday nights when we're looking at demons and other supernatural beings. So both of these two things go hand in hand, and I think you're really going to enjoy what we are going to get in tonight when it comes to the Watchers and their rebellion. A couple things real quick. I mentioned last week that by the time we get here this Sunday, I will have had 2 books drop. So I have Johnny Walker Ranger Volume 2. It's on sale, ebook copy on Godless right now for $1.99. Volume 1 is still on there for 99 cents. I had a new episode of Southern Discomfort drop on June 7th as well. It's episode 4 called Tetramet Rising. So if you like really intense kind of seedy splatterpunk, then you definitely want to check that one out.
Yeah, we did have a few newcomers, Brian, Vincent, and Juju World.
Hey, Brian.
Vincent asked if the Book of Enoch came before or after the flood.
The events in Enoch talk about what is coming with the flood. So the events in the book are meant to highlight what happened around that time period and why the flood was sent. But as we saw last week, the book itself was not written till its earliest parts around 200, 300 BC. So we talk about all that in last week's episode. If you want to go back and watch, I go into some detail about that for sure. So anybody else I missed, Bethany, I need to say hey to before we
I'm doing a quick once over. And yeah, bear with me. There's storms here too. That's what kicked me off.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm just doing a once over. Junk is also on. I don't know if I said Clarissa.
Where did it go?
And yeah, everybody, remember everyone to write out questions. And then once Zeke gets into his teachings, he will answer questions at the end.
It's like all the way under here.
You get it?
Yeah.
I don't think we need it anyway.
Yeah, I don't think so for this one. Do we? Yeah, no. You can
I
just,
can't see from there.
just start on D. Your life is a golden, like a ring of solid gold, like a vow that is tested, like a covenant of old. Your love is enduring through the winter rain, beyond the horizon. Mercy for today. shame, and know my hurt you name. And it's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. And you will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. You will be praised, you will be praised. With angels and saints we sing, worthy are you, Lord. And it's why I sing your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Your praise will ever be on my lips, ever be on my lips. Oh, trade?
Yeah. You're singing that next one, aren't you? What?
Yeah, I guess I'll do that one. Alright, I'm gonna hit y'all with a classic. I haven't even tried this on guitar, so we'll see. Oh Lord, my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shouts of acclamation and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. Then I shall bow in humble adoration and there proclaim, my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou a great power. Take it away. Oh wait, I thought we were doing another one.
Or do you want after the teaching?
Huh?
After the teaching.
I might not be awake. Here, I'll stay awake. I want to hear about the angels. So. We didn't do what a beautiful name. How'd you like that high note?
Good job. All right, y'all, we're going to go ahead and get into the teaching part. Let me scoop this up some. Y'all can see me better. All right, so if you don't have a copy of the Book of Enoch, you can find one online if you want to be able to read along with us. It's very easy to find. Just Google Book of Enoch, free online, and you'll be able to find a copy of it. So before we get into the text, I'm going to pray for us. Father, thank you for the study of your word. We ask that you would bless this time, that you would give us understanding, that you would give us insight, and that you would teach us how to live better. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I want to start off reading out of the book of Genesis. Starting in chapter 5, verse 21. It says, Enoch lived 65 years, and he became the father of Methuselah. Then Enoch walked with God 300 years after he became the father of Methuselah, and he had other sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Then we jump into chapter 6. In the book of Genesis, and this is what we're going to get into tonight, the fall of the sons of God as depicted by the book of Enoch. And it's basically a commentary and an elaboration on these verses in Genesis. Starting in chapter 6, it said, Now it came about when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, because he is also flesh. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of his thoughts, of his heart, was only evil continually. The Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved greatly in his heart. And the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, and the animals, and creeping things, and the birds of the sky. I'm sorry I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So the book of Enoch, and what we're going to look at tonight, is basically an interpretation of these verses in Genesis as to how these sons of God, which are called watchers in the book of Enoch, what enticed them, what happened, and how the great wickedness spread throughout all of humanity and ended up corrupting them. So we're going to be in the book of Enoch, starting in chapter 6. 1 second. Need my notes. And as we've discussed last week, this section of the book of Enoch that we're getting into, this is called the book of the watchers. And it's going to tell us how they fell, what happened, what their future is, and Enoch's involvement with them. So verse 1 in chapter 6 says, "And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied in those days, that were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose wives from among the children of men, and begat us children. And Semyaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then they swore all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And they were 200 in all, who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of their leaders." And the translation that we have here, R.E. Charles, is the English translation, which he takes from the Ethiopic text. And if you remember last week, we talked about there being several texts of Enoch. And all of these names mentioned here are debated about how they were really pronounced. There's variants of how they are spelled, and also debate about what they mean. So we're not going to get into every angel's name here, but what we're going to focus on before we get into chapter 7, there's some things I want to point out in this text. First of all, we see that the rebellion is linked to this son of God, to this watcher called Semyaza. He is mentioned here as the leader, as the one who wanted to come down and do this act. All right, he's the one who sees the daughters of men. And the text here, when it talks about they desire him, it gives this idea that there was this deep lust that was going on that Semyaza had. And he knows it's wrong. And that's why he's telling everybody else, all the other sons of God around him, like, I'm going to go do this thing, but I'm scared y'all are going to leave me hanging and not do it. If I'm going to go down, y'all got to come with me. And so he gets them to swear an oath. And what's interesting about all of these names, all right, Semyaza is the leader, and you're going to see his name spelled different ways throughout the book of Enoch. And then we have all of these other names mentioned. And what's fascinating about these names, if you are able to go back and do a study, is you'll see that each of these names means something, like something of God. Like you have sun of the God, you have clouds of the God, you have rain of the God. And so scholars debate these names in thinking it's possible that maybe they were named this because, as you know, they have this ruling authority. So maybe God appointed them over the moon, the rain, and such and such. Some scholars say, no, it's meant to be contrasted to what we read earlier last week. If you remember at the end, we went through and Enoch is telling us to observe nature and how everything in nature does what it is supposed to do. And that stands in contrast to the sons of God. I kind of tend to lean towards this view because of the dichotomy and the contrast that it seems to draw. That all of God's creation does what it is supposed to do. The sun, the moon, the stars, the earth, the seasons. However, the highest ranking beings cannot do what they were supposed to do. And so whereas all of creation does these things, these other angels, in contrast to it, go against God's order. The other name, if you look in this name list here in chapter 6, you'll see a name kind of in the middle, Asael, Asael. This is what is later, the name later translated in the book of Enoch as Azazel. And we're going to get into Azazel tonight and looking at why there's discrepancy in his name and what this meant and the debate that goes on about Azazel and who he is when it comes to the book of Enoch. We're also going to see in here several connections to other books in the New Testament. But what I want to point out to you here is that before we get further into the text, you see Semyaza is mentioned as the leader. We have him kind of taking the reins in chapter 6 and 7. But then all of a sudden, when we jump to chapter 8, we see Azazel is mentioned as the chief angel who led people into sin. So we see this almost this competition or this shifting of blame. 1 minute here we're reading that it's Semyaza, and then a couple chapters later we read it's Azazel, and it can be very, very confusing. And here is what scholars have kind of debated on what's happening. They think one of two things are going on here. One possible interpretation is that there were two traditions. That there was the tradition of Semyaza being the one who leads the watchers astray. And then there's the tradition of Azazel as being the one who leads the watchers astray. And so some scholars say Enoch is just taking these two traditions and kind of conflating them together and mixing them together, and then just kind of decides to go with Azazel. Others say, no, there's not two separate traditions here. What's happening here is there's a little struggle here between Azazel and Semyaza about who is going to be the chief fallen angel over the watchers as kind of their leader here. And we're going to see this develop in the text. So we're introduced to a whole bunch of cast of characters that are coming in here in the book of Enoch, right? We've got the watchers that were mentioned who are going to bind together and do this. The next thing we're going to see in chapter 7. And it starts off, and all the others together with them took unto themselves wives, and each chose for himself one, and they began to have relations with them and to defile themselves with them. And they taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots, and made them acquainted with plants. And they became pregnant, and they bore great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and to drink the blood. Then the earth laid accusations against the lawless ones. So here we get an insight as to, according to the author of Enoch, what the Nephilim were like, what these giants were like. So their offspring, the women become pregnant, and it says that the angels taught them all of these charms, all of this knowledge. And we're going to see that it's going to get into this some more in later chapters, talking about everything that was taught. Now, there's a lot that's going on in this text that is meant to point us back to the book of Genesis. And you're going to see this in chapter 8 and 9 and 10. But first of all, let's look at how they viewed the watchers. They viewed them as part of them coming down was not just defiling the race of human beings by having this offspring, but it's also by what the watchers taught the children of men. Now, there's nothing wrong with this knowledge per se, and that is not the issue. It was how it was taught and what the knowledge was used for. And this brings us back all the way to the book of Genesis, in the first several chapters with the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So when we look at these ancient Mesopotamian texts, and there's always this contrast of moral right and wrong and wisdom that can be gained and forfeited. And so the theology that the early chapters of Genesis teaches us is that man was supposed to, human beings were supposed to choose the tree of life. In essence, that means they were supposed to choose and learn wisdom in God's way. But what happens instead is they end up going to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And they take it on themselves to go learn this knowledge outside of God. It's not that God ever wanted to withhold any of this knowledge, but it was meant to be learned and explored through him and in his timing and in his ways. And so humanity taking this tree and eating of the knowledge of good and evil represents his desire to go outside of God and do things his own way according to God's way. And we see this amplified with the Watchers. They come down and they are teaching this knowledge that was only meant to be learned in a safe and sacred space with God. And so that's part of the issue that's going on here. And then they become pregnant and they are giving birth to these Nephilim. And it says the Nephilim were 3,000 ells tall. The best scholars can come up with and understand is that an ell is similar to the measurement of a cubit in the days of the Old Testament. And the cubit is the length of your forearm, from your wrist up to your elbows. Now, what's interesting here is the size of these giants. Some texts read 3,000 ells, 3,000 cubits, and others read 300 cubits. All right, so either way, if it's 3,000 cubits, you're looking at something, that we're getting close to a mile high. 300 ells is probably about 450 feet tall. So you're looking at like Godzilla-size proportions. I'm of the inclination, based upon my studies, and I could be wrong, but I lean towards the original being 300 cubits, 300 ells over 3,000. I think the 3,000 could be a scribal error that slipped in, but there's debate about whether it should be 300 or 3,000. So regardless, you have these creatures, these beings that are so massive, the earth cannot contain their hunger. They're eating everything, and they destroy the land. They destroy the animals. They start going after the humans and eating the humans, and then they start cannibalizing themselves. And so there is just this rampant violence. And so we can see now, based on Enoch's understanding of Genesis, as to why God had to do a cleansing and a reset, because the Watchers had left their first abode. They spread this corruption all over the earth. And as we're going to see, they attribute all of this sin to Azazel in these later chapters. And the corruption passed to humanity, and it wasn't just to humanity. Now the Nephilim are everywhere, and they're destroying the earth, and this wickedness is rampant. So God is like, all right, it is time for a reset. And we start to see what is going to unfold because of these teachings. In chapter 8, it says, And Azazel taught man to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments. And he goes on to say that Azazel was the one who taught weaponry and also the beautifying of women. And he goes on to say Semyaza, he teaches the enchantments or the root cutting. And then he gives other names of Baroquiel and Kakobiel and all of these angels that taught all of these different things to human beings. Now notice here what we have in the transition. If we looked in chapter 6 and we saw the name Asael, and now in chapter 8, we see the name Azazel. So what I want to do right now is kind of pause and talk a little bit about Azazel in the book of Enoch. Now, those of you who have been keeping up with the Tuesday night teachings are familiar with what I'm going to say. We've talked about Azazel some, and we looked in Leviticus chapter 16 and 17, and we saw how the proper name Azazel is used in the contrast that on the Day of Atonement there was supposed to be a goat for Yahweh and then a goat for Azazel. And that goat for Azazel was meant to have the sins of the people laid upon it, and then it was sent out into the wilderness to Azazel. And we talked about how the wilderness in the Old Testament mindset was the place of chaos. It was the place of all of these dark creatures, these dark entities. And Azazel is closely related to this type of goat demon character. And we looked at how this name Azazel is in Leviticus being used as a proper name. So there was this understanding in the ancient Israelite culture that Azazel was associated with some kind of evil entity out here in the wilderness. But then what happens is all of a sudden we jump to the book of Enoch, and we see that Azazel has graduated from being associated with the Day of Atonement and this goat demon to now he is like this chief rebel angel. And honestly, scholars don't know how this happened, how the jump made. There's just not a lot of information. All we know is we go from seeing Azazel in Leviticus as kind of this goat demon, and now he is being mentioned as the head rebel angel in the book of Enoch. So what scholars debate with the book of Enoch, especially these two different names of Azazel, is some would argue that Asael is the right name and that Azazel should not even be in there. Every time that we see Azazel, it's a mistranslation, that the text should really refer to Asael, and they connect him to a little bit of kind of some of these more ancient Canaanite, Sumerian type of deities. And then they will also try to argue that the word Azazel in the Old Testament is never meant for a proper name. And so they try to disconnect the link here between Azazel in the book of Enoch and Azazel in the Old Testament. Now, on the flip side, there are scholars that say, no, like this Azazel should be the right one, and this is connected and influenced by what is going on in the Day of Atonement. And so I kind of lean towards the route of scholars that see Azazel as a chief or as a demon, some sort of entity in Leviticus in the Day of Atonement. As you've heard me talk about that on the show, that's what I think. And I think that there is a connection with what is going on here in Enoch. It is to be connected with this Azazel of the Old Testament, but how he jumps from being just kind of this, mediocre goat demon thing in the wilderness to being a chief angelic son of God, scholars do not know. We do not have enough information on that. But some other interesting key things about Azazel. If you bear with me just a second, I'm going to pull this up in my notes. not only are we going to see Azazel here as a chief and as sin being attributed to him, but later in the book of Enoch, we are actually going to see that Azazel is, in Enochian thought, is Satan. He is the chief enemy of God. So Enoch does identify Azazel with Satan. And this is seen in a couple of places here throughout the book of Enoch. And I'm going to read those passages in just a second. If I can find them. Okay. Here we go. In 1 Enoch 65, we see that the fallen angels here that we're talking about, the watchers, they are eventually dubbed as Satans, plural. In those days, Noah saw the earth, that she had become deformed and that her destruction was at hand. And Noah took off from there and went to the extreme ends of the earth. And he cried out to his grandfather Enoch and said to him 3 times with a bitter voice, "Hear me, hear me, hear me." And I said unto him, "Tell me what this thing is which is being done upon the earth, for the earth is struggling in this manner and is being shaken. Perhaps I will perish with her in the impact." At that moment, there took place a tremendous turbulence upon the earth, and a voice from heaven was heard, and I fell upon my face. Then Enoch, my grandfather, came and stood by me, saying to me, "Why did you cry out so sorrowfully and with bitter tears? An order has been issued from the court of the Lord against those who dwell upon the earth, that their doom has arrived, because they have acquired the knowledge of the secrets of the angels and the oppressive deeds of the Satans." Okay, so in Enoch later on, the fallen angels are referred to Satans. The watchers are referred to Satans. They are the armies of Azazel. And then in 1 Enoch 69, it's following this same trajectory of Satan's. And here's where we start to see Azazel is mentioned as the chief Satan. Elsewhere, we have another angel of these fallen angels that is kind of linked to the serpent in the garden. And this is important because what we're seeing in Enoch is that they associated one of these fallen angels with the serpent in the garden, which they did not think was the chief rebel. And then Azazel, who is associated as the chief Satan figure. And so now this throws a whole bunch of stuff at us that is setting us up when we get into some more stuff on Tuesday night and looking at how the idea of Satan comes to be in the New Testament. And so I wanted to take a moment just to do that and trace a little bit of Azazel's history and how he is understood in the book of Enoch. Because most people miss this, and it's never brought out and talked about that in the book of Enoch, Azazel is the chief Satan, and that name is used of him, the chief of the armies, the chief Satan. And so we at least know during this particular time period, between 200-300 BC up until the days of Jesus, there was this train of thought that associated Azazel with being the arch nemesis of God. In chapter 9, we get into the judgment upon the watchers. We see here, "And then Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel looked down from heaven and saw much blood being shed upon the earth, and all lawlessness being wrought upon the earth. And they said to one another, the earth made without inhabitant cries to the voice
and crying up to the gates of heaven. And now to you, the holy ones of heaven, the souls of men, make their suit, saying, bring our cause before the Most High God. And they said to the Lord of ages, Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings, God of the ages, the throne of your glory stands into all generations. In your holy and glorious name, blessed to the ages, thou have made all things, and you have power over all things. And we see the angels go on and say, okay, God, pretty much we know you're going to do something about this, but what do you want us to do? And we see here in these next chapters that what eventually happens is Azazel is bound and he is put in the middle of the earth with all of these jagged rocks on top of him. And this crying out, the earth crying out, the blood of these people crying out, this brings us back to the story of Cain and Abel, right? When Abel dies, God says to Cain, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. And we see this same kind of theme happening right here. The blood that has been spilled is crying out to God for justice to be done upon the earth. So the first order of justice is to take Azazel, the one who is attributed to all sin, and he is to be bound and he is to be thrown into this pit and to be kept there for 70 generations or until the day of judgment. And it is this section here in chapters 9 and 10 that we see some heavy, heavy influences in the New Testament in regards of how they draw off of the Satan and judgment language. So I want to go to a couple passages in the New Testament right now to point these things out. But first of all, while I'm doing that, I want to talk to you about these archangels that are mentioned. We have 4 that were mentioned here in the book of Enoch. And these 4 archangels are before the throne of God. Now, when we get later on to the book of Enoch, we're going to see that 7 archangels are the spirits before the throne of God. So the number jumps from 4 to 7. And we're going to see here in the book of Revelation how John draws on this Enochian interpretation of the throne room of God and upon the judgment of Satan. So we're going to look at the book of Revelation chapter 4. And this is a throne room vision. All right, John is taken up in the spirit and he begins to see things around the throne of God. And he says in verse 4, around the throne were 24 thrones, and upon the thrones I saw 24 elders sitting clothed in white garments and golden crowns to their heads. All right, this is imagery of this is divine council imagery, these thrones around God's throne. Out of the throne come flashes of light and sounds of peals of thunder. And there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there was something like a sea of glass, like crystal. And he goes on to say that there are these living creatures around the throne with eyes front and back, one like a lion, one like a calf, one has the face of a man, and the fourth like an eagle. We see Enochian tradition in this verse of having the 7 spirits of God before the throne. Scholars now, based upon the book of Enoch, are going back and kind of reinterpreting how they understood this passage at first. There's a lot of scholars going to seeing these 7 spirits of God. They're talking about the 7 archangels in the book of Enoch because they are called the spirits before the throne of God. And we see John playing off this imagery. And they also think John is playing off the imagery too
with the book of Enoch because the 4 archangels that were mentioned in the text that we just read in Enoch before it jumps to 7 later on down the road, they were the throne guardians. They were coming back and forth between God and humanity. And so some even see John's use of the living creatures as the number 4, kind of giving a nod to the book of Enoch. The other influence we see in the book of Revelation is found in the cry of the martyrs in chapter 6. Remember, we just looked at how the blood is crying out, and you have these people in the book of Enoch crying out before the throne of God, begging God, how long? When is something going to be done? When are you going to judge the earth for all of its wickedness? When are you going to cleanse it? And John plays off of the same thing with the cry of the martyrs. In chapter 6, verse 9, when the Lamb broke the 5th seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. And they cried out with a loud voice, saying, how long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell upon the earth? So we see it's very similar language to the book of Enoch. And this is important to bring out because, as I mentioned last week, this book, the book of Enoch, there's so much depth in it, and there's so many things there that have influenced the New Testament and never gets brought out. And people treat this book like some dirty secret that it shouldn't be around and shouldn't be in our Bibles, when the exact opposite is true. Its influence is sprinkled all throughout the writings of the New Testament. It just takes a trained eye to see it. And scholars are seeing this. The longer they study it next to the New Testament, more and more things are being brought out about how influential this book was. Now, before we jump to Revelation 20, I want us to look at the binding of Azazel in the book of Enoch. All right, so we're looking in chapter 10. I'm going to start down around verse 4 or 5. And again, the Lord said to Raphael, bind Azazel hand and foot, and cast him into the darkness, and make an opening in the desert, which is in Dudeo, and cast him therein, and place upon him rough and jagged rocks, and cover him with darkness, and let him abide there forever, and cover his face, that he may not see light. And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire, and heal the earth, which the angels have corrupted, and proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague, and all that the children of men may not perish throughout the secret things that the watchers have disclosed and taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel. To him ascribe all sin. That's the verse I was telling you about. So Azazel, he is the chief sinner according to Enochian tradition. All sin and rebellion is linked back to him. And so we see now the Lord gives a command to Gabriel to go do these other things. And we have more judgment language about God setting things right and fulfilling his promise to do away with wickedness. But I want to read to you the similarities here from Enoch and the book of Revelation when we see the binding of Satan. Towards the end of the book of Revelation, chapter 20, John says, that I saw an angel coming down from heaven, holding the key to the abyss and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold of the dragon, the serpent of old, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years,
And he threw him into the abyss and shut it and sealed it over him, that he would not deceive the nations any longer until the 1,000 years were completed. After these things, he must be released for a short time. So we see the similarity. Azazel is bound. He's bound until the day of judgment. And then once that eschatological day of judgment comes, Azazel is going to be released and judged. We see a very similar thing here with Satan in the book of Revelation. He's bound for 1,000 years. We're not going to get into how to interpret this because that is for a whole other theological lesson. Right now, it's just suffice to point out the influence in the New Testament and how they're drawing off of the book of Enoch and taking what was done to Azazel and ascribing it to Satan. Other places in the New Testament, in Peter, in 2 Peter, in Jude, talk about how the angels did not keep their first abode, but they left and rebelled, and they were sentenced to gloomy pits in chains. Both Peter and Jude are focusing and drawing from the book of Enoch and saying how if God didn't even spare the ancient world, but committed these watchers to chains and darkness, how he's not going to spare this coming world, this world for the coming judgment. And so we see them drawing off of these judgment and restoration themes in the book of Enoch. So what we have here with Enoch, just to sum it up, the watchers have sinned. They have brought great iniquity upon the earth, and it has spread. The Nephilim have destroyed everything. There's just this heightened destruction going on, and the whole earth is grieved because of what the watchers have done, and it's suffering. And so the flood has to come for a reset to happen. And so what Enoch is doing is he is expounding on why the flood was necessary, why God had to do it in order to get rid of the mess that the watchers have made. And we see too the justice in God, that he is not, according to Enoch, he's not letting these watchers go unpunished, that they are now bound, and they are committed to the gloomy pits where they are waiting there until the day of judgment. And so Enoch exalts the righteousness of God, and we see the hope that is being given that yes, the sin is bad, yes, the iniquity is great, but God is going to set everything right. This is the nature of books like Enoch and Revelation, what we would call apocalyptic literature, that yes, things are bad, and things may get worse, and people will do terrible things to each other. They will say terrible things against God. They will sin greatly. But there is a day that's coming when God will make everything right. And the New Testament takes this even further to say that God has already provided a way to deal with sin and judgment, and that is through the cross of Christ, that Christ died for the punishment of sin, to take iniquity away, to do away with it once and for all. And through his resurrection, he is able to do away with sin and bring life. And that one day he is going to step back in and bring order to everything. Because as you've heard me say time and time again as we're doing these studies in the ancient Near East, that they had these two concepts of order and disorder, that sin brought disorder. We'll look at the chaos creature, the serpent, in Genesis 3. The serpent brings chaos into God's order. And so now there's this disordered world with sin and rebellion, humans doing awful things to humans, humans saying and doing awful things to God and doing awful things in the name of God. And so all of this God is promising is going to be made right one day in Christ. And that is what apocalyptic literature is pointing us towards. And we're going to see Enoch jumping back and forth through these different themes. All right, the book of Enoch has a couple things going on. You have what's called narrative time and chronological time. So you have the narrative time of what is being written and what you're reading. And as we read through the book of Enoch, we see chronological time. We're jumping back and forth with different visions that are kind of hitting at the same event from a different perspective. This is what apocalyptic literature does. This is what we see in the book of Revelation, is that we see events cycle through time and time again, and they're being looked at and talked about from a different perspective. So everything that we have going on in the book of Enoch when it comes to judgment in the end, all of this is perfectly normal themes that we see in apocalyptic literature. So we're going to kind of wrap it up, today's teaching here with ending on this. The main thing I wanted to bring out today was this idea about Azazel and this concept of him being the chief Satan in the book of Enoch. This is going to come into play in our studies on Tuesday nights when we start looking at the Satan tradition and how we went from a couple of different entities being named as the leader of the rebels during this time period to all of a sudden coming into the New Testament and seeing that the devil and Satan, as we know him, this is kind of won the day. And so how we got there, so it's going to be fascinating for y'all to hear and for me to be able to talk about with you. So that is all that I have for today. So I'm going to go get my chair, and we will, for whoever's still with us, we will open it up for questions about what was talked about today. All right, Dustin, Bethany, either y'all around? All right, so Bethany texted me her internet went out. So if y'all bear with me for a minute, I'm going to try to look and see if I can get these comments up. Yeah, I'm sorry, y'all. I can't see any of your comments right now. One second. All right, Bethany's going to try to get on and help me. Hey, Dustin.
Oh, thank you, Christina. Yeah, junk Jesus talks about just as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Thank you, Paranormal Witch. Yeah. Yeah, you're right, Vickie. We are nasty to each other. Yeah, well, I'm glad you joined us, Christina. So yeah, I'm seeing all your comments right now. I'm looking for any questions. Yeah, Christina, it is. They're all of a sudden just kind of brought up in the text later on. It jumps from 4 archangels to 7. There's a lot with Enoch, just like with what we just talked about, Semyaza and Azazel. All of a sudden, Semyaza is being the chief, and then we just transition, and Azazel is the one. And so scholars are still kind of not sure. They think maybe there's some textual variants that have been lost along the way that gives some of this information, because there's a lot when we look at comparing the Ethiopic text to the Greek, and then even some of the fragments in Aramaic. There's some big textual variants about things. So a lot of it we just don't have the answer for with the information that we have. So yes, at that, Vickie, to answer your question, yes, Azazel in the book of Enoch was the chief Satan. We see another branch of thought in some other books during this time period where Belial / Mastema is the name given to the chief arch enemy of God. And then some even go as far to saying, yes, no, it is Satan. Satan, as we know him today, is mentioned in some of the books during this time period. But according to Enoch, yes, Azazel is the chief Satan. And it's kind of like there was this struggle as to what do we really call this chief rebel. Like they all agreed there was one, but they just kind of didn't really know what to call him. So that's the development of this thought of them trying to place a name and identify this chief rebelling watcher. Any more questions? So we're going to be taking little bite-sized pieces out of Enoch each week, kind of doing the same thing. A lot of it, some of it's repetitive. Like I said, the same vision from a different angle. So this is not a study that we're going to be going verse by verse through the entire book, because the book is big. It's like 108 chapters. Some of the chapters are very, very small, but some of them are long. So this is not going to be an exhaustive thing. This is more of just to give people an introduction to it, what the book teaches, and how much it's influenced the New Testament writers. Oh, I believe that there's a spiritual battle right now every day that grows in intensity. The closer we are.
I can vouch for that.
So yeah, Christina, I think there's a battle raging right now.
Wait, can I tell my story on this morning?
Yeah, sci-fi. We encourage that. I do as well. I think it's good to know what other people believe, know what other religions teach, whatever other beliefs teach. And that comes very beneficial when we're doing Old Testament studies and looking at the ancient cultures around the Hebrews that they interacted with and drew from and spoke against. So it's very, very interesting. Hey, thank you, Teresa. Yeah, it's amazing the influence that is there, that is just overlooked simply because this book is not studied as much as it should be, but it is definitely making its rounds in popularity among scholarly circles. You can now you can find commentaries on the Book of Enoch. You used to could not find them anywhere. The one I would recommend is Michael S. Heiser. You can get his commentaries on the Book of Enoch. They're not exhaustive, so it's good for anybody who is wanting to study. I actually use his commentaries in putting together everything each week, so I would recommend those. Michael S. Heiser, Heiser. Yeah, according to the book of Revelation, there are going to be angels released from a bottomless pit that are going to bring great, great grief upon mankind. So there is a spiritual battle going on. Like I said, that grows in intensity. And yes, the archangels and the fallen angels, absolutely. It's one of the things we've mentioned in the past about the Watchers being ruling spirits over territories, and when they fell, they started ruling the nations that they were over with in wickedness. And you see a battle going on in the book of Daniel between Michael and the Prince of Persia. Michael is trying to get somewhere, and Daniel's visions were delayed because of the spiritual battle that the angels were facing to get there. So Why do you think when the angels watchers mated with the humans, it created giants and Nephilims? I think, like, honestly, I don't know why. I have no clue. I know that they were drawing off other traditions as well. This concept of the Greek Titans and other things. You see this belief is common through a lot of religious writings. All we are given is that there was something about the daughters of men that appealed to these angels, and they lusted after them, went down, and then the Nephilim, it was this angel-human hybrid that happened. And scholars debate too, depending on who you read on Genesis and how they understand and interpret the book. Some of them will take that passage as literalistically as possible. Others will take it more metaphorically, depending on how they understand the genre of Genesis. So, even though we may establish that's what the text said, there's still a huge debate of did it really happen that way among scholars. So, Vickie, that gets into the point of why it happened that way. I honestly have no idea.
Wait, yeah, I have proof on this. They found tons and tons of bones that were giant-sized humans, and there are people that claim today to still be that one, that are like massive. So there's really no telling. I mean, I think all the evidence is there if you look at the right evidences with an open mind, of course.
All right. Got any questions left about the book of Enoch?
Because that's what Goliath was.
Yeah.
Giant Nephilim. So,
Yeah. The
multiple witnesses.
spread of the Nephilim is something that is also a whole other thing to look, and you can trace these different races of giants throughout the Old Testament. Much too big to get into this for all of this, but that is an interesting study, is the spread of the Nephilim. And also there's debate of if the Nephilim were wiped out in the flood, why are they still around later in Scripture? Why do we still see some remnants of their offsprings, like in Goliath and then King Og of Bashan? So that's a whole nother debate. Some scholars say, well, it does say in the book of Genesis that in those days and afterwards. So, there are some that think that this angelic rebellion was still maybe going on even after the flood. So it's just a whole other can of worms that's open for debate. It's like the thing with this type of stuff is when you start looking at it and you think that you've got one thing down, all of a sudden it just opens up a door to something totally different that you've got to go research and figure out. And, a lot of times with stuff like this, it's like herding cats trying to pin all this down and figure it out and how all this went together. But the thing to remember about this intertestamental period is this was a period of theological development. Like a lot of these things were, just being really hammered out and developed and talked about during this time period. So some claim that angels don't have sex, as in male or female. If this is correct, how would they mate with humans? So this gives a couple interesting answers, right? We do see angels depicted as very human-like. especially in the book of Genesis, when we look at Sodom and Gomorrah. The angels that came to Abram and Lot were very, very human. They were, in fact, so human that the people in Sodom and Gomorrah wanted to do them harm and were begging Lot and them to let them out. What seems to be so dastardly about what the Watchers have done is that you have to remember these Watchers were the most powerful beings that God had ever created. They were part of the divine council. They were the highest ranking angelic beings in creation. So for them to, what scholars would attest, for them to come down in human form would not be something too outlandish for them. And the very fact that they did that and went to procreate, that was the sin. The angels were never meant to do that and to take that right upon themselves. That was only for humanity. And so when we get into looking at, some will try to use the passage in the Gospels where Jesus says in, the kingdom, they bring this lady before Jesus and they say, telling the story, we've got to say you got a woman, she's been married 7 times. Whose husband is she going to be in the kingdom? And Jesus kind of tells them, you don't understand the scripture or the power of God, basically that in the resurrection, they'll be like the angels in heaven, neither marrying or given in marriage. And so the idea there is not about procreation. The idea there is about marriage and wedlock. There's nothing in that passage where Jesus is forbidding and saying angels can't rebel against the natural order and procreate, because clearly the Jews had no problem with this theology, and neither did the people in Jesus's day, obviously because they were so heavily influenced by the book of Enoch. Okay, PW, how do you feel about reading the book of Enoch? Do you see the world differently? I would say I see things more clearly than differently. Enoch definitely brings attention to the heightened spiritual battle. It definitely brings a lot of clarity in understanding things in the New Testament. There's nothing new per se in Enoch about the character of God. We're not learning anything new, quote unquote, about God's character, which is another reason why this book I think fits so well and it should be canonized, because Enoch is not teaching what people would, in Christian circles would consider false teachings about God and his character. It's basically affirming the Judeo-Christian view of God and the view of God in that time period. So for me, it was more the book of Enoch began to bring a depth of clarity to some things for me. Okay. All right. I see your comment, Vickie. I wonder if they didn't use a human host, so to speak. Yeah. I do not know. Like if it was more of a possession, did they possess a body? The text doesn't indicate that. The text indicates that it was the Watchers themselves that did it. So I'm not sure if there is an interpretation that goes that route. But that would be something interesting to look up. Any more questions? So Tuesday night, we're going to be jumping back into this same type of material. We're going to be in the intertestamental period talking about the development of their concepts of demons and the Satan and all of this stuff. So all of this is going to just play into and help highlight and give some context to some of the other things that we're going to be talking about on Tuesday night. So you'll start to see how all these things are beginning to piece together. Any more questions? Just want to remind everybody too, if you hadn't gotten on Godless yet, grab a copy of Johnny Walker Ranger, volumes 1 and 2, Southern Discomfort. They're available there for discounted prices. Yeah, I know, Bethany, the storms are knocking her off of her Wi-Fi.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. No, sorry about that. Yeah, her Wi-Fi is going off, and one of our members is getting ready to get hit, so I'm really keeping closer eye on there. Vickie, I sent you a picture of it, but so I'm sorry I wasn't able to be up here to help you, Zeke.
Oh, it's fine, man. I'm just wrapping it up anyway, man. Just kind of waiting to see if there's any last minute questions I missed.
Let me look real quick. I went up as far as it would let me. Let's see, Teresa. Christina, this is Zeke, not me. So all the thanks goes to him. We're the ones that are grateful for him to be humble enough and come up and do Sunday nights and Tuesday nights.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, Teresa, I read what you're saying. Yeah, we got welcome all kinds of beliefs to this.
Yeah.
And even
Yeah.
if you're still trying to figure it out.
And of course you can, Jimbo. You can do that.
Take with a grain of salt. Yeah.
You're blue, aren't you, Jimbo? Is Jimbo blue? Does he blue? I can't tell. Okay, the person I was trying to reach finally got the picture of the radar. I sent him. I'll be right back.
So yeah, the Nephilim is another fascinating realm of study for y'all to go jump into and look up on your own. We'll address it as it comes up in Enoch. So the one thing we know is obviously the Enochian tradition thought of these giants as massive, like Godzilla style proportions. So you can see why they, in their viewpoint, ravaged the entire earth. I'll wait till Dustin gets back. See if there's any more comments.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you, buddy.
Sorry, it's just our other member. She's getting ready to get pelted with big hail, anywhere from an inch on up higher, and potential whirlwind action, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I'm just keeping a very good close eye for her.
Okay.
Question. Let's see. Let me go up. Let's see. Where do we leave off? I'm gonna pay cut her. We appreciate. Let's see. Can I drop something? Okay. No, he is not. PW, can you get the information from him real quick and then and go look for it? I don't have time right now to make him a mod, or he can wait until tomorrow night and he can drop it if he wants then. As you can tell, yeah, I'm multitasking big time here. Let's see. Okay, here we go. I have enough with all the other stuff that they showed me that I have to figure out. I'm leaving out the sex part. I didn't see any of that yet. And PW asked a question above, and no, Jamo, not blue. Okay, where's this question? Y'all gotta help me out here. It's the same with the demon. They don't see gender as well as the. Okay, that was for Vickie. Okay. Is that the one? I am not Christian or Catholic. I am looking, but I learn from the religion. Okay. Yes, that's a good thing to do, isn't it, Zeke?
Yep.
Okay, I'm not seeing it, Vickie. I mean, yeah, and that's what I'm doing too, Vickie, and trying to. Oh, I just lost Zeke. Gosh dang it. Here we go. Okay, there we go. I don't see any more. PW asked if you wanted her to bring some Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, if she's got. I know we had asked her about some of the beliefs of Asian and Oriental cultures on demons and stuff. So yeah, absolutely. Hey, Channel 52. Welcome. Glad you joined us. But y'all, if nobody else has anything, we'll go ahead and wrap it up for tonight.
Sounds good. And yeah, I was gonna say I got a few minutes to spare here. Most of it right now is going around her, but I think she's still gonna get some of it. So I'm gonna spend my next hour or so tracking that for her and keeping an eye on it.
All right. Well,
thank you all for coming, and thank you, Zeke, for coming up and doing the shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, everybody, for being here and listening. And we'll be back at it, the Book of Enoch, again next Sunday, 7 o'clock Central, 8 p.m. Eastern. So hop on, tell your friends. Hopefully, you'll learn some more new stuff next week. Be sure to hop on tomorrow night with Dustin and his show. And then I'll be back Tuesday night again. So, y'all come on out and tell us hi and hang out with us a little bit and listen to what we have to say and give us your input as always. So thank you, everybody. Don't forget to check out my new books on Godless. Everything that I get in royalties goes towards the Winnebago Fund. For those of you who are new, I don't know if we'll be able to pop the picture up here. Yeah, there it is. That is so for some of you who are new, Bethany and I, who was on here, she's my fiance, and that is my dream chariot. She is absolutely devastated that I would want something like that, but I think it is grandiose. So all of my book royalties are being saved to go towards the purchase of a 1985 Winnebago to haul Bethany around in and watch her get mad at me for even owning it, much less driving it. But yeah, that is it. But thank you, everybody, for joining us and tuning in. Come back again next week, 7, 8 Eastern, and we will be back into the book of Enoch. Dustin, you want to fire up? You got a video for us, Dustin?
Oh, yep. I can do the end of the live stream video for you if you want. Sorry, I was talking to the other member, and they're driving, and they got about a 45-minute drive home through some very, very nasty and dangerous weather. So let's all cross our fingers and pray that they make it home safe, because it's pretty ugly in Mississippi right now.
Yeah.
So
prayers and good thoughts.
Exactly.
Not involved.
So, thank you all for joining. I'm queuing up the video now. Never give up, and much love to you all.
Is this what giving up feels like? I don't know, I don't know. Tell me, have I lost my mind? Nowhere to go, so far from home. Is this what giving up feels like? I don't know.